Okay, so let's cover Visual Studio here. And for those of you who have already taken my course in C Sharp, or really any C Sharp course, you should already be somewhat familiar with Visual Studio. So I'm not going to go too in depth. You should already be somewhat familiar. I will show you, it's opening on my laptop here, I will show you how to make a web application in Visual Studio. So here's Visual Studio, and it looks like I need to update it, so I'll be doing that after this video. Let me also open Visual Studio Installer as well to show you what you need to install when you go through the command prompt. So if you go through the prompts, and it might not let me show you until I update. Let me try to modify, see if it'll let me modify. Okay, and it will, sweet. Okay, so as you can see, I have some different modules checked here. So these are the modules that you have installed in your Visual Studio environment. So essentially it's asking you is, what exactly will you be doing when you use Visual Studio? So you can use Visual Studio for a lot of things, all .NET related. So those of you who have taken my C# course, we activated this module here to do .NET desktop development. You can also do a lot of other things. Visual Studio supports C++. It supports game development with Unity for anybody that took any courses in the game development track. You can do .NET Core cross-platform. You can also do mobile development and Xamarin up here, mobile development with .NET. Or what you can also do, which is you can see in the categories here in Web and Cloud, is you can do ASP.NET Web development, which is what we're going to be doing here. So I have that checked. I also have the desktop environment checked for my C# course still. So if you'd like, you can go ahead and check that one. You can also install the individual components, which I won't be doing here. But just to call out, if you'll notice, I do have all of the .NET Framework stuff installed for my C# course. But you'll see here that I have the .NET Core 3.1 installed, which is the version of .NET Core we'll be using for this course. So .NET Core is still fairly new. It's only a few iterations in, so we'll be using the .NET Core 3.1, and LTS stands for long-term support. So essentially, they've published this, and Microsoft has came out and said, we'll support this version of .NET Framework and come out with regular updates for it and patches for it as time progresses until at least we come out with 4.0, at which point they'll sunset the long-term support for the .NET Core 3.1 framework. So if you did install Visual Studio either in the past or you installed it without choosing which exactly you'll be doing, remember to come back here and check this ASP.NET Web Development. So I'm just going to go ahead and close since I'm not going to do anything with it. You can also do updates and stuff in your Visual Studio installer, so I will be coming back here later. Let me go ahead and exit out of this. So now that I have Visual Studio installer or Visual Studio open, I can click File, New. So I'm going to create a new project, and my new project is going to be a .NET web application. So as you can see here, there's many different templates you can use to create applications in Visual Studio. Many different languages, many different platforms. What I want to choose here is actually web, which will then filter this window to just web applications. And you can see here the first one that pops up is ASP.NET Core Web Application, which is the type of web applications we'll be building in this course. There's also the classic .NET Framework, which I mentioned having to have Windows Server installed running IIS. But this ASP.NET Core is cross-platform. So that's why people leverage the Core framework. I'm going to go ahead and name this example web application. Don't worry too much about the name. I'm probably just going to end up throwing this away afterwards. Put this in repos, that's fine, and then click create. And then from there it'll ask you, see, it'll auto-populate to ASP.NET Core 3.1. I also have 2.1 installed. It might come with Visual Studio, I'm not sure, but we're not going to be using 2.1, so don't worry about that. And notice you can use .NET Core, which is the cross-platform framework, or .NET framework. And we'll be using, obviously, .NET Core, as we want our applications to be cross-platform. So we want to be able to use this on either a Windows machine, or actually we can put this on a Linux machine if we wanted. If we wanted to deploy this application using Docker or something. And you can see over here on the left, or on the right, I'm sorry, if I knew my right from my left, you can see on the right, you can enable Docker support, which I'm not going to check for now, since we're not going to do anything like that. And from there you can choose, because there's multiple different types of web applications even from there. What framework will you be using with your web applications? So anybody familiar with React and Angular? Angular was built by Google, which is a web framework using JavaScript. React is another JavaScript framework for the web that we will not be covering this course. React was developed by Facebook, actually. But the ones we'll be working with primarily is either an empty or a web application using a model view controller. So if I click here and I click create, it'll give me a new web application with the model view controller, or MVC, folders already there for me. So here we have our startup class, which is going to it's going to register all of our middleware. And I'm starting to get red lines, probably because I need to build. Now let's go ahead and build so it gets all of its dependencies here. Notice at the bottom of the screen it's installing all of the NuGet packages, or it's going out to the web and getting all of the packages that it currently does not have. And it looks like it's building now. And it succeeded. So here's Visual Studio, and we have a .NET application running, or we have it open in our Visual Studio environment. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of the toolbox. We're not going to use that. Exit out of the Server Explorer. So here in the middle of the screen is where we're going to do all of our work and do all of our coding. So again, anyone that's taken my C# class, this should all look very familiar. The output at the bottom essentially shows you any console output you're going to give it, or the output of maybe a build or something that you've done. So you can always right-click on your solution and build it or rebuild it or clean it. Get rid of anything that you might not need in your solution. So that's what your Solution Explorer is for. It shows all of your files. You'll see it has this model view controller structure here on the right-hand side, which we'll learn more about next week. Essentially, it's the framework we're using, the model view controller framework, initially built by Ruby, or Ruby on Rails, but Microsoft kind of stole it and made it better. So they stole it and improved upon it greatly. So that's what MVC stands for, is the folder structure of model view and controllers. And then you can see in the Team Explorer here, we can actually either add our code to GitHub or Azure DevOps, which I will do in another video. So if I wanted to add this code to Git, I'd be able to do that in the Team Explorer. It's called Team Explorer essentially because you're going to be working with it. If you were working with a team, you'd want your code in some sort of version control system. That way other people on your team can check your code out, look at it, push code to your repository, and alter code, and you could work collaboratively as a team. So that's why it's called the Team Explorer. Solution Explorer, we already covered, is where our solution is. You can run your web application here at the top. It says this is configured to use SSL. It's going to open in a browser, so it's just essentially telling you that. So we're going to install this certificate, the HTTPS certificate, on our local machine. Fine. Don't worry too much about what that means quite yet. And then once I clicked run, it's now running my website locally with my local version of IIS. So I don't have Docker support right now, so it's using IIS to run my .NET Core web application. So if I exit out of it, it should automatically stop running my application here. And you'll notice if you go to the views, it'll actually show you the view in HTML that we were just looking at here. Along with any popular, the www root is essentially showing us all of the client-side libraries that are installed already. So here's our CSS file, any images that we might want in our application. So this was probably the banner that was in that carousel we were seeing. So any of the view type of stuff we're going to put in this www root folder. So that's essentially Visual Studio in a nutshell. If you're interested in using Visual Studio, you can go ahead and download it and install the given modules. My next video is going to cover Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to try to get to the same point in Visual Studio Code. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out or ask questions in the discussion board, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.